again, and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
And the show's brought to you by the good graces of Manhattan Neighborhood Network and EVT Educational Productions. Bob Anthony is on an assignment in the local area, so he's not going to be with us for this go-around. And folks, we're pre-taping, as we normally do, and we're pre-taping the Wednesday before former FBI Director James Comey will be doing his testimony before the, I believe, Senate.
I'm sorry, I was reading something.
James Comey?
James Comey, oh yeah, his
before the Senate
testimony, yep.
Yeah, so it's a public hearing, and there's all kinds of speculation, and there's even some prepared statements that's been leaked to the press or even already shown to the press. But that will definitely be playing around in the news along with the ongoing Russian investigation.
Was today his first testimony, or was tomorrow?
Thursday.
Tomorrow is the first of his testimony.
Yes. There were some other intelligence folks like Mr. Coates and some other folk who were testifying today, Wednesday. But by next Monday, it's probably going to be Comey and all Comey that will linger just because that's what people have been waiting for with bated breath. Yeah. So, but because that's going to gobble up all the news anyway, what we're going to try to do is to go back, because within the context of all the other things that have been going on, including the terrorist assault attack in London, there was even an attack in Iran that ISIS claimed responsibility for today, Wednesday, which would be last Wednesday when the show airs. There's been all kinds of things that, of course, activated our tweeting president. And so we could start with his reaction to the London bombing, because that'll segue right into what we're going to talk about in the climate that's been set. So give us a little bit about the president's tweets and his tweet war with the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
Well, I'm still struck by the fact that Trump, because Mayor Khan said that Trump was ignorant of the situation and the facts. Trump took that to mean that he was calling him stupid. So Trump is apparently too stupid to realize that ignorant doesn't mean stupid.
Well,
but I mean, this is why he's going after him, because Khan said, you don't know the facts. That's what ignorant means. It doesn't mean that you're dumb. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. But that's the way this man's mind reacts to things like that, to any slight.
Well, part of the problem for the rest of the leaders of the free world and a lot of Americans was the fact that as soon as the news hit, he was using that as an excuse to, quote, call for the need for his travel ban.
The travel ban.
And then he got into a Twitter war with the mayor of London, who happens to be a man who practices the Muslim faith.
Right.
And so his Muslim travel ban, he tries not to make a Muslim ban, and is continued attack on those, quote, bad Muslims that he wants to keep out of the country to keep the country safe. That's basically what I want to get into as a background to all the other stuff that's swirling around, because we can bring up a lot of the stuff and put it in perspective, and a lot of people have done it for us, because you sent me a series of emails. Why don't you start off with some? Let's take the headline of some of that particular email that's really worthwhile.
Well, in the online news source Salon, they have a headline that says Trump's election has created safe spaces for racists. Southern Poverty Law Center's Heidi Berich on the wave of hate crimes. They did an interview with her. Heidi, and check me on her last name. It's spelled B-E-I-R-I-C-H. Berich, I'm assuming.
Berich,
and she is, she's the head of the Southern Poverty Law Center's intelligence division. And it's a very interesting interview. I think There were a quote or two that you had that stood out for you.
Oh, it's interesting because the email headline, when you forwarded it to me, really caught my eye for real, because the headline states Trumpian atmosphere of racial and ethnic hate.
Well, that's the way it came across to me.
That's the headline. So we're not sitting here making this stuff up. It's seemingly coming across to a lot of people like that. So let's jump back to that salon interview with Miss Barish.
Forgive us for not being able to pronounce
We've not heard her name pronounced. There is no phonetic,
I've never heard of her before.
No phonetic pronunciation like we used to get in radio in the old radio days, folks, where they'd actually give you a great phonetic pronunciation so you would not screw up the person's name. That was in the good old days of radio when they needed to look out for their announcers so that they wouldn't sound like they were not intelligent. So it was interesting that Salon decided that they would follow up on what they thought had been created, a safe space for racists. And that was Heidi Bayrish, and this was her take on the wave of hate crimes.
Right.
And this interview was done back in March.
It was.
Right? And so if you want to quote some of the incidents from March that was in her article.
Well, the shooting of that Indian gentleman in Texas, I believe it was. Kansas.
That's correct.
Yeah. And then there was another a Sikh man in Washington State.
Right, that's one of the ones she
shot,
listed.
After the perpetrators allegedly said, "Get out of our country, go back where you came from," or words to that effect.
To that effect. She quoted 3 of them, but the interviewer at Salon came right out and fled. Do you see Trump as a symptom or a cause of these hate crimes? And we'll quote from her answer. Quote, I do not think there's any question that Trump is the cause. The first day of his campaign, he bashed immigrants and said Mexicans are rapists. The entire campaign included xenophobic remarks, anti-immigrant remarks, anti-Muslim remarks, racist remarks, trading in anti-Semitic imagery and anti-women comments. Let's not forget that during the campaign, there were hate crimes committed, very severe ones in Trump's name. For example, there was an immigrant in Boston who was beaten by 2 Trump supporters. There was a failed attack on a mosque by a Trump supporter in Los Angeles. Then the pattern accelerated. Within hours, right after the electoral vote was counted, the pattern of the attacks followed the language he used. Immigrant is number 1, Muslims number 2. You can go right down the list and see that based on who he attacked in the campaign, they then became victims after the election. End of quote. Mm-hmm. So she basically, the Southern Poverty Law Center, as we have documented on Media Watch more than one occasion, it is their mission to actually keep tabs on the rise of hate crimes, the right-wing groups, militias, all those folks that come out and do these dastardly deeds and attack people, and including monitoring their websites that tell you how many exponential increase in alt-right hate websites popped up after the election of Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. So they track this stuff on a regular basis. So that's why I'm sure Salon went to them to deal with this issue. Now, this was March when she was listing this stuff. Just a week and a half ago, we had in the state of Portland, the rapid transit, where this crazy wacko started berating these 2 young women. One, I believe, was African American. The other one was of Middle Eastern descent. She had on a hijab. And so he started berating them. 2 individuals came to their defense. 3 individuals came to their defense. 3 got stabbed by this alt-right individual who is now in custody and will be tried for, I guess, murder, if at least.
Hopefully.
Because 2 of the 3 men actually died from the stabbing wounds that he inflicted upon them. And so...
it's a shame that occurred, but I'm glad to see that there are still individuals that will stand up.
You know, it's horrific that because you don't want to see someone maligned, berated, and demeaned, that you're going to lose your life because we're now in a society. And the fact that the man who is in the highest office of this land is the person who is fomenting this kind of behavior, and people are actually doing these acts in his name. And this is not from me, folks. As Ms. Bark was saying, was beaten by 2 Trump supporters in Boston. So that was the Salon interview. I know you had a couple of other interesting things. I believe there was one from the Huffington Post. Here we go. Huffington Post. Let's see how
the
this
racist
one
examples.
comes up.
16 examples of Donald Trump being racist, according to the Huffington Post.
Oh, okay. Give us some examples that the Huffington Post is quoting.
Well, let's see. I'm just going to go down their subheads. Well, I think I am. Trump denied responsibility for the racist incidents that followed his election. Okay, that's true. There were nearly 900 hate incidents across the U.S. in the 10 days following the election, a report released last month by the Southern Poverty Law Center found.
Same folks.
Same, yep. Those attacks included vandals drawing swastikas on synagogues, schools, cars, and driveways. An assailant beating a gay man while saying, quote, "President says we can kill you all." Forgive me. President says we can kill all you faggots now, end quote. And children telling their black classmates to sit in the back of the school bus. This is insane. And nearly 40% of those incidents, the SPLC found, people explicitly invoked the president-elect's name or his campaign slogans. So yeah, right there, he's given de facto permission to commit these crimes.
Okay. In another Huffington Post thing that was actually posted back in October, just before the election, they were doing a survey on the rise in these kinds of behaviors during the campaign, and one of the headings that they were looking into was dangerous speech. A study by California State University San Bernardino's Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism argues that, quote, rhetoric is one of the significant variables that can contribute to hate crimes. Moreover, Professor Susan Benish of American University identifies 5 variables that maximize the likelihood that speech leads to violence. Trump scores highly in all 5. 1, a powerful speaker with a high degree of influence over his audience. Well, he certainly demonstrated that during the election campaign. 2, the audience has fears the speaker can exploit. He certainly exploited a bunch of xenophobic, nativist fears. Trump's audience is overwhelmingly white. According to a Wall Street Journal NBC poll, Trump's national share of the black vote is just 5% compared to 76% for his opponent, Hillary Clinton. And this is in the run-up. But 3, speech is understood as calls to violence. So there's this underlying understanding. 2015, there was a wave of violence against immigrants in South Africa. The violence started after the influential Zulu king, Goodwill Zwelithini, said to a gathering of supporters that foreigners should pack their bags and go because they're taking jobs from South Africans. Does that sound familiar? Who's taking jobs from Americans, and who's been saying that? So the parallel's perfect. 4, historical context, and specifically, if there's a recent history of violence. The United States has a long history of violence by whites towards non-whites. This includes colonial violence against Native Americans, a history of slavery, and the assassinations of minority leaders, to name a few. They even assassinate their white leaders, to name a few more. This has led to protests, which in some cases led to new violence, like in Charlotte, Ferguson, Baltimore, and Milwaukee. 5, the speaker is the primary source of news for his or her audience. Well, we know that's the case in Donald Trump's
Absolutely.
world. Okay, and the other heading on this particular article was a race-based policy. It's not only dangerous speech that creates conditions for racial violence, but also racist policies and institutions. And they go back and they quote some historical things like World War II and the Nazi propaganda, and then the Rwanda genocide, how the military facilitated the killings of Tutsis. So they're giving you these historical examples of, okay. And then, of course, they tie it back to Donald Trump's proposed deporting of undocumented immigrants, and then proposed not to let immigrants into the country. Then
the list goes on. But back to what you quoted, the speaker is the primary source of news for his or her audience.
Right.
That's very true, and he accomplishes that in two ways, by his tweets and by hog-tying the media.
Okay, the fake news campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. So you know, that's an interesting segue, because the other half of this particular perspective discussion that we're having is, not only is there a rise in hate crimes and anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-black, anti-Jewish, you name it, the other, the vilification of the other, these studies and these articles that we've been selectively quoting from all document that has increased since the 2016 campaign and Donald Trump's rhetoric. Well, guess what also increased during the Donald Trump campaign and Donald Trump's rhetoric? The assault on journalists. Okay? So now, what happens when a free society that's helped in its maintenance of democratic principles by the Fourth Estate, that's what journalists do, folk. We try to cover what's going on and bring it to the people as clearly and unbiasedly as possible. When dictators and people who want to have their populist following believe everything they say, the first thing they do is vilify the media. And among the stuff that we have is the Trump assault on the press. Let's see if we can find.
No, the Trump sanctioned, more or less. Well, it started with that congressman who body slammed that.
Started long before that. Assault on U.S. press.
It did start long before
that is
that,
the latest iteration. Here, you sent me these, Ray, so I don't know if you looked at them or not.
No, I did, but my memory's not what it used to be.
The headline, the slug is assault on U.S. press,
yes.
okay? And so under that assault, you've got the Columbia Journalism Review, folks, which is one of the oldest journalistic watchdog, gatekeeper about making sure journalists do what they're supposed to do and do it in a fair, unbiased way. The Columbia Journalism Review had this particular headline going. If I can lose this cover page that's gotten in the way of closed window, right?
There you go.
Tracking the Trump era assault on press norms. Now, this is press norms they're talking about, not just the physical bodies of the press, but the actual how we do our job and how we try to do it as fairly as possible. And we only have about 10 minutes to go through some of this stuff, but let's see what we can do. Every few days, Donald Trump issues a new threat against the press. That's the opening. That's the opening line of the article. The author of this Columbia Journalism Review piece is Shelley Hepworth, and it was filed on May 25th, which is about week and a half ago. Yeah. And Shelley opens up with, every few days, Donald Trump issues a new threat against the press. Some are minor, essentially, name-calling and common complaints about coverage, while others are harder to dismiss. The fear among some press freedom experts is that even small incidents can erode the media's power to do its job. and create a trickle-down effect in which Trump's words embolden others at the state and local levels. Okay? CJR is compiling a list of instances when norms that protect press freedom in the U.S. have been pushed and in some cases upended entirely. We'll update this list periodically. Let us know if we missed anything by emailing us at shepworth@cjr.org. If you see anything, folk, that you feel needs to be, please free to email these folk.
That's Shepworth,
Okay.
SHEPWORTH.
At cjr.org. Okay, now they are giving you, starting with one of the most recent. May 24th, Guardian reporter is body slammed by GOP candidate in Montana House race. Give us that one, Ray. You remember that?
The Guardian U.S. reporter Ben Jacobs, along with the witnesses, say that Montana GOP candidate Greg Gianforte body slammed and punched Jacobs after the reporter asked a question about health care while Gianforte was preparing for an interview with a Fox News TV crew. The impact reportedly broke Jacobs' glasses and sent him to the hospital for x-rays. Gianforte has been charged with assault. Now, I've never heard of a congressman or a senator or anyone in the public eye actually physically confronting a reporter. This is new to me. This is new since Trump came on the scene. So this is the kind of atmosphere they set up. But the alarming thing is that it's now okay for our elected officials to act that way.
Well, guess what? On one of the links that you sent me, they led off with the fact about reporter being assaulted by a congressional candidate, and da-da-da. Well, it turns out that a Republican individual in Alaska physically assaulted a reporter who asked him a question while he was trying to do his job on May 5th. Yes, you remember the story.
Yes.
Okay, so now this was a local newspaper reporter trying to do his job, and he got physically assaulted by. Now, I don't want to say that there seems to be some preponderance of R's in front of the names of these people who are assaulting these journalists, but it was a Republican candidate that body slammed Ben Jacobs. It's a Republican guy who, Dan, whatever his name is, in Wasilla,
I don't recall his last
Alaska. And so who was the Republican candidate that launched this assault on the press? Who is the Republican incumbent now occupying the White House who are destroying these press norms? Donald Trump. Okay, so the Republican rank and file that had been elected to office seemed to be following Mr. Trump's lead about, don't worry about it. If this is the paraphrase of Trump during the campaign, in my day, he wasn't allowed to do that. He'd have been hurt. Right. And if it happens, don't worry about it. I'll take care of your legal fees.
I'll pay your legal fees.
So you get somebody who's talking about, let's go ahead and physically assault these folks, because if they arrest you, I'll pay your legal fees. What does that say to your followers? It's okay to assault these people.
Whatever I want to do.
All right. So let's see if we got now. Get back to the press norms, not necessarily all the physical assault on the press people. We're talking about how they're trying to get in the way of the press doing their jobs properly. On May 21st, Rex Tillerson, our Secretary of State, ditches the press pool. Now, it's our job to cover what our Secretary of State's doing, right? Right.
But you have a president who has already threatened to ban the press from White House briefings.
Hey.
So why should I take them with me on my tour or whatever?
Yeah. So the scale of normalcy for this. This is the third time Tillerson, who describes himself as not a big media press access person, has failed to invite the customary press pool along to an important diplomatic event, even though the State Department later apologized. It's a concerning trend. Well, let's pick up on that. Tillerson ditches the press corps. Donald Trump invites two Russian diplomats, a ambassador and a foreign service guy, into the White House, and guess what? he ditches the U.S.
The
press
US
corps.
press corps,
They can't get in. They
but
can't cover what's going on.
but the Russian
Russians
press
can
corps.
go in and they can cover what's going on. And then to add insult to injury, when everybody said, gee, something just leaked about you releasing classified information to the Russians. And he goes, oh, well, maybe, who knows, this a leak. Vladimir Putin says, oh, if you want the transcript, I can provide it to you. Vladimir Putin says he could provide the U.S. press corps the transcript of the meeting between the U.S. president and the Russian Foreign Service people, because there was no U.S. press there, but there were Russian press people there.
Absolutely.
So the assault on the U.S. press is really, and it's funny, but it's not funny, folks, because that's how your democracy gets destroyed. Now, I wanted to actually get to the state of where journalism is under real physical assault, and because we ran out of time dealing with our own semi-serious problems, but not to
They're killing
people in Mexico.
journalists in Mexico.
They're killing
Yes.
journalists in Africa. They're killing journalists, but Mexico has become like maybe the most dangerous place on the planet for journalists. So I'm guessing that we have maybe about a minute left in this session, because I think we started around 22 past the hour. And so I would say we would be running out about time about now, I would think. So when we come back next time, we'll probably be talking about the Comey testimony. And whatever else tied to the Russian investigation that's ongoing. We might be able to pick up on the problems that the journalists are facing in Mexico, because they're just killing them left and right down there. But since I think we're out of time, this has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
And we will catch you the next go-round.